their goal is to have something done by June. Which is interesting with the BHA one, because it's like everything. It's done in parallel and in silos, and then they'll come back and I can forward you that information. Those meetings are still open.
Yeah, well, I just got a copy of what they put together because I sat in on the one last week that the whatever the Health Commission work group was, the statewide, they were talking about it, and so we followed up on that. And just again, as you said, I was trying to help them connect with some of the stuff that's also going on, and that Baltimore's really done some nice stuff on to so that things could get interfaced before the training started.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is 5:31, so I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. Welcome to the Trauma Informed Care Task Force. It is great to be with you all on a chilly Thursday afternoon. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and is on YouTube. And my daughter Maya would like to say hi, and then she will be quiet and color for the rest of the meeting.
Hey, Maya.
All right.
Hi, Maya. Have fun coloring.
All right. All right. Now that is out of the way. So again, today is Thursday. It's February 2nd, 2023. Great to be with you all. I'm Zeke, chair of the Baltimore City Trauma Informed Care Task Force. Really looking forward to today's conversation. We are going to be back with our friend Jonathan from the Baltimore Crisis Response Inc., BCRI. Folks will remember that this task force led an effort during the last budget cycle, city budget cycle, to attain $1.5 million in funding for BCRI to do their mobile crisis response work. And so today we're going to be hearing from Jonathan about just an update on that funding, as well as some issues related to BCRI and young people. Between now and Maya, between now and then, I did want to shout out, although she's not on the chat, and sorry, I should have given this to you first, Franny, but I know that Nika Namdi, task force member, wrote a really good op-ed in, I think, the Baltimore Sun, worth checking out. What, baby? Maya, what did we just talk about? We're not doing that right now. We're going to do some coloring, and then we can do opening the printer. Okay. All right. So in any case, that was a really good op-ed, worth reading. Someone else I feel like was in the news recently from the task force. It'll come to me, and or shout yourself out. But with that said, unless anyone has any announcements for the good of the group, I will remind everybody that we are going to be at the Penn North Enoch Pratt Free Library next task force meeting, which is what day, Franny?
February 16th.
February 16th. So same time, 5:30, we're going to be at Enoch Pratt. We're going to do two things in that meeting. One is to hear from the amazing Donna Bruce, task force member, about the Peer Navigators program, as well as Heidi Daniel, who's the head of the Enoch Pratt Free System. We're also going to hear from Baltimore Core about a potential opportunity that we've been working on with them, piloting some Healing City Core navigators through Baltimore Core. We got a big grant, which I'm really excited about, and we will get into that. So does anyone have any announcements? And if not, we will go straight into Round the Horn. But any announcements, anybody?
I just so the statewide commission has been meeting, and its work groups have been meeting, and I think there's a lot of positive stuff. I'm just wondering, is there some way for the task force to be asked to get the summaries from the overall group and the different work groups, because there's like 4 different work groups now that are maybe more, to be able to come to, again, our just to keep people informed, because I've been sitting in on a couple of the different both the overall commission meeting and the committee meetings, because they're all open to the public and they're all on Zoom, but I think and they may be actually recording them. I'm not sure whether they're recording them, but a lot of which came up the last 2 weeks, I think has been very relevant to the same things we've been discussing. And they're talking about statewide, and obviously we're focusing on Baltimore City, but things need to be integrated. We can't have 3 different trainings, and they've put together some nice summary for the policies that they're now recommending back to the legislature to be, incorporated in legislation, which will then guide our, both our funding and what the agencies have to do. So I'm just wondering, can we make, some way of facilitating the communications between the groups? So our work group and also people in Baltimore that are just on the Zooms who want to find out about them, because now there's between our meetings and the other meetings, there's like 3 or 4 every week now that are, again, very relevant to things that we're all doing mutually. So I didn't know whether there's some way of, Zeke as, the chair, and you're also a commission member. So,
yeah, no, Phil, I think that's a great idea. And I think Dave is on that commission as well. There's probably a couple other folks who cross over and are on both this one and that. I know you are. So let's figure out a way we could bring the 2 together, whether it's just like bring a few of the subcommittee group leads to this task force to talk about what we're doing, or maybe just doing a big state trauma mixer and bring everybody together. So let's do that. Let me work on that between this and next meeting. We got a lot with the library, but maybe the one after that, we could bring some folks. All right. Anybody else have an announcement? All right. Hearing and seeing none. Franny, you want to put us in what is our question of the day?
Sure. So today's question of the day is, what is a recent experience or interaction you've had? So I'm keeping it broad, that has exceeded your expectations. So coming in with a little positivity this Thursday, what is a recent experience or interaction you had that exceeded your expectations? I'm just going to open it right up. Create breakout rooms, open rooms. Great. And let me know if it doesn't send you in, and I can try to troubleshoot that. Oh, hi. Do you pronounce your name Dina? Oh. Hey, Jonathan. People are doing like a round the horn breakout, but I don't know if you wanted a minute to like get situated. I know Dina from your team is here. She's in a breakout.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll just hold out here too.
Okay. Thank you so much again for bearing with us with all the scheduling nonsense. Every time I sent an email, I was like, oh my God, I feel so bad.
No, it's all good. I understand. And I would prefer to speak with everybody in a way. So it kind of worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's good. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm well. I like your background.
Thanks.
Yeah, he's been in space all day.
Do you guys
Yeah.
want me to pull Dina back if you guys need to? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, we're good. Hey,
Great.
Allie.
My sense is, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying hi back. It took me a second to unmute.
All right. And do you need anything, like, I might just make you the co-host or something, just for fun.
Oh no, that's too much pressure. Yes, I just have some notes that I have on my
Great.
that I'm going to talk from. So
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah, I know everyone's really excited about having you on again and hearing some updates.
yeah,
Especially Phil Leaf. Phil Leaf is psyched.
Bill is always like,
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah, I got your message. I think later on, you know, people these days don't answer phone calls
You're
whose
so good.
names are not.
Yeah, no, and I have a New York number, so everyone is always like, decline.
Exactly. I'm like, who is this
Yeah.
calling me?
Yeah. No, my
So-
phone calls always get declined, so no worries.
So I'll save your number now.
Yeah, I was just like, sometimes it's less irritating to do the scheduling stuff via just like a quick phone call. So I was like, oh, if I get him on the phone, then I won't have to be like supremely annoying via email. Hey, Lindsay.
Hey.
Lindsay, they're like almost done in the Round the Horn breakouts. Do you want to go in? Do you want to chill here? What's your sense?
That's fine. I can chill here. I joined late because I'm having like a migraine, so I'll
Oh,
just hang out.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. No problem.
If it's, I don't know if this is like a myth or not, but don't they say looking at screens is bad for migraines?
Yeah.
So if you need to leave, by all means, like,
I was
Yeah,
resting.
I deal with
a little
those
bit
too.
later. Yeah. I'm gonna try to hang in as much as I can, and if it gets bad, I'll hop off. But try to listen. Thanks though.
I'm gonna just close the breakout rooms and then people will come back in. I think it gives them 60 seconds. I never know, like depending on the question, I feel like people are either they answer the question and then they're like ready to come back, or they're like, oh, you cut us off. Hey, Cynthia, how are you?
I'm good. Sorry I'm late. I was busy.
You're
trying to
so
find
good.
something.
You're actually just in time for the best part, which is hearing from Jonathan Davis.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Sounds good.
That is far from the best part, trust me.
So there are a couple rooms that are still, people are still chatting in them. So we'll give them the extra 10 seconds to come on back. But for everyone else, welcome back.
Hi.
Hey, Maya.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. Great to see folks. Good to hear about some positive experiences. Shout out on our little Zoom to DPW, who exceeded Tika's expectations with a cleanup of a dirty alley. So props to them. All right, so I'm really thrilled to welcome back our friends from BCRI. We know that in the last budget cycle, we worked really hard to secure $1.5 million to support the good work of mobile outreach led by Jonathan Davis and his team. So wanted to give Mr. Davis, Director Davis, the floor to share what they've been up to, specifically interested in how we've been able to expand capacity based on the additional financing, but also just thinking about where you are organizationally, strategically, and again, how this task force, how the Trauma-Informed Care Task Force can continue to support the work, because we know that amidst the mental health crisis that so many Baltimoreans are experiencing, having that direct outreach and support that shows up and does the work and helps triage and helps people connect with medical institutions or whatever the next step needs to be, having that trusted community messenger is so critically important. So we thank you for that, and we welcome you back to the Baltimore City Trauma-Informed Care Task Force, and take it away.
Thank you, Councilman Coy, for welcoming us back. Just want to do some introductions to some folks on my team. Last time I was solo. I came with an entourage tonight. So the first person I have is Nicholas Richard. He oversees special projects for me. He's been at Baltimore Crisis Response almost a year now, and Nick will be sometimes standing in my stead when I can't be available to make community updates with folks. So he would be a good contact. And also Dina, who is one of my director of clinical operations, and she oversees our residential programs, but more specifically is overseeing the activities associated with the $1.5 million that was awarded to BCRI. As always, we deeply appreciate your partnership. I just want to call out some of the touch points that we've had with people outside of just giving updates. The first one being Sarah meeting monthly with my residential teams to enhance the referral process between the University of Maryland and BCRI. And I believe, and Dina, correct me if I'm wrong, that BCRI will be piloting a direct admission program from University of Maryland to BCRI through those conversations. So we appreciate Sarah's engagement with BCRI. Corey Witherspoon had an opportunity to kind of highlight some opportunities to be better engaged with homeless service providers. And through Corey, we are connecting with those providers to do listening sessions to see how we can be better neighbors and partners to homeless service providers. And Phil and I are working on target lists of some folks to do some listening sessions regarding an exciting update that I will share with you all at the end of this conversation. Again, super excited that the city invested $1.5 million back into the city through mental health, particularly allowing BCRI to guide services and supports to people. Soon after the monies were announced, we met with MOTSE and the mayor's office and Baltimore BHSB. It's always a difficult time saying BHSB, to kind of come up with a plan of action to spend those monies. We quickly developed a plan that we thought would support the city more broadly and fill in some gaps around responses. Submitted the contract to the city, and the city did their due diligence in all of their approval processes. And about 2 weeks ago, the contract was finally approved by the Board of Estimates with no issues. So exactly, I see Franny clapping her hand. So we're super happy that that the Board of Estimates approved the contract, and so services really began about 2 weeks ago, albeit the announcement was made last summer. I do want to talk about our agenda for those funds. The overall objectives for those funds is to promote the overall well-being of Baltimore City residents, to ensure that low acuity crises are responded to appropriately and followed up by adequate support, and to mitigate access barriers by providing high quality mental health education and support to the community. We plan on doing that by increasing our community engagement and outreach activity. We have committed to conducting weekly outreach engagements to Baltimore City and monthly outreach engagements to Baltimore City as well. We have also agreed to work with Baltimore Health System, Behavioral Health Baltimore to enhance their outreach agenda for 2023. And those particular activities include providing mental health first aid training to residents and community members throughout all the districts of Baltimore, mental health prevention and early intervention training to citizens across all districts, and providing resource and referral information sessions to citizens of Baltimore City. In addition to increasing our community engagement and outreach activities, we have also planned to do post-critical incident debriefing activities. So when there is a critical incident in the city, most oftentimes BCRI is there to do a critical incident debrief. We saw an opportunity to remain in the community at least a month to 3 months after that incident with these post-critical incident debriefing activities. And that could look like additional incident debriefing sessions, group sessions, one-on-one education and mental health training as well. In addition to conducting post-critical incident debriefing activities, we have created a low acuity crisis response team. And those teams are made up of peer certified specialists who have been trained to support people in crisis. And those peer support teams will support our current mobile crisis support capacity. So if there may be crisis in the city, and sometimes it's determined who should be first on call, this particular peer support team could be an appropriate response in that particular situation, particularly if the incident may not be as severe to warrant a nurse or a clinician. We could send one of those peer support teams out to support the individual as well. And that is it in terms of the activities for the $1.5 million. As I noted that, albeit the grant was approved 2 weeks ago, we have started to ramp up and prepare for engaging in these activities, and we will begin services ASAP for this particular contract. Are there any questions or thoughts and comments?
Yeah, first, let me just say thank you to your team, to you for the good work. Glad to see the funding going toward good use. Before going to my friend Corey, let me just ask, I think we're seeing, I don't know if it's an uptick or what, but just a lot of issues lately with children and pretty severe mental health crises. Phil's asking about city schools in the chat. We know we've seen a fair amount of violence recently impacting our young people. There was a stabbing. Fortunately, the person wasn't severely injured, but a child got stabbed by another child yesterday outside of Patterson High School. So we're just seeing a lot in terms of stress, anxiety, trauma, depression among our kids. I know that there's been in the past some limitations in terms of BCRI being able to support young people, but I'm curious where we are on that, whether that is changing and what we can do to support, because it is, pretty rough right now.
Yeah, Councilman Cohen, I agree. There definitely is need for some targeted attention around youth. The update that I was going to actually share, Councilman Cohen, is that BCRI won the grant to provide youth mobile response to Baltimore City. And so this is the first time that the city would have dedicated mobile response teams for youth. And so we're hoping to kick that program off, I believe, May of this year. I mentioned earlier that Phil and I is working on a target list of people to conduct some listening sessions, just to better understand what is going on in the youth space in terms of current services and current gaps. And we hope to, through those listening sessions, help develop a more robust and present mobile response for our youth, particularly for my ask for the trauma-informed task force, because I know you all are deeply engaged in the work with youth. If you all can support with connecting me to people to have those listening sessions and conversations to inform all developments of teams, that'd be really helpful.
Gotcha. Okay. Corey.
Well, sign me up for the listening session. But also I like through this task force is like, it's amazing because I'm seeing so many things that, I really wanted to happen, like occurring. I'm seeing that, mental health first aid is being pushed big time. I'm seeing that, Baltimore Crisis being able to help the homeless. And I'm also seeing something big that I always like root for is giving the power to the people, is like the peer support, having like highly trained peers come out to, that they'll assist, in crisis that doesn't need a clinician. So, we know that we have a shortage of social workers and Black social workers in a Black city that's 70% African-American. So just to have all this is like amazing. So I'm just happy about the work that's being done. Thank you.
No, really appreciate that, Corey. Thanks for that comment, and just, agree. It's really gratifying to see the work happening. Yes, I can take the paper. Okay, I'll make a picture. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, just I wanted to share, and Zeke had mentioned to you that one of the organizations I work for, going to bring some funding to the project around mental health first aid. But one of the things that has come out is a teen mental health first aid, which is actually mental health first aid for youth in grades 10 through 12. We're hoping to pilot that with some of the schools, but we're also working with other organizations because it is very involved to find other types of, something that's analogous to mental health first aid that may not be as time consuming, but that really is peer to peer, because really peers are the true first responders. They know before anybody else what's going on. That's that part of that saturation. So we'd love to be part of that. We're doing some of the work in mental health first aid for youth and adults, but in the entire community, not just in the schools. And then with the other organization I work for, we also have a nationwide project looking at school violence, but seeing that as a function of trauma, mental health, and toxic stress across the community. So,
Yeah, Dave, we would love to partner. I'm sorry, I meant to put my email in the text in the chat, but I sent it as a direct message to Franny. I will. Okay. Thanks, Franny. Dave, my email is in the chat. If you don't mind following up, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would love to see some kind of connection between the mental health first aid. Dave is really one of the best trainers I've ever seen. He's one of the only ones I've ever seen, but he's really, really good at what he does. And we've got him over at Pimlico and working with some of our schools right now through Corey Witherspoon. Would love to see a connection between BCRI and mental health first aid. Other people are raising their hands. Councilmember Ramos.
Thank you, Councilman, and apologies, I can't turn my camera on right at the second. And also, thank you so much, Director, for all of your work. I think I told you about this incident last year. There was a major mental health crisis happening in one part of my district with a well-known person who has mental health challenges on the street. And, he was screaming and yelling, and he's been out on the street for 20 years. Okay, we all know him. And I called the number that's on your website, and the person that answered said, well, this is a crisis, an emergent piece, so we need to send a police officer. And I was like, no, we don't want a police officer. We need somebody who's going to help this guy. Now, it turns out that the police officer who came, knows the guy and has, been working with him and has been trained. But I think we're not seeing a lot of folks calling because we don't want a police response. So with your new work and all the resources you're getting, and I'm really, really excited about it, can we start seeing that alternative response?
Yeah. Councilwoman Ramos, thanks for bringing that up. I know you and I have talked about this a few times. We have a number of deployment options based upon how the crisis presents itself to us, and sometimes it is appropriate to have a police response, particularly if there's we can do a threat assessment, or the threat assessment is really high. In those situations, we prefer to utilize police who have been participated in the CRT program, and those officers have received training. Most of them have received training from us, and most of them have participated in listening sessions with clients within our residential programs on site, or we would prefer to use our crisis response team, albeit a co-responder team with a therapist and 2 police. Those police are also trained in supporting folks with mental health and behavioral health. And in those responses, albeit the police are there, the the therapist takes the lead, and the police is only there for safety concerns if needed. So sometimes police, is a part of the response, but our goal is to limit that as much as possible. But if there is, if we can't determine the severity of the threat, or we know that it's really, really high, we need them present, but we will make sure that those who are trained to be supportive in those particular incidents are there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think in that case, a dual response would have been really good. But this gentleman, he can't survive out here on the streets, even though he's done it for 20 years. Like, I can't, it's not a good situation at all. So I do think that we need to have a larger conversation about our folks that, just, they can't take care of themselves and they can't be out here. So it's something that we need to think about, but I'm so excited about your work, and thank you very much.
Dr. Phil?
Yeah. So besides the clinical or the peer supports, we've had a number. I think Zeke mentioned we've had a number of young people who have been murdered. Last week, a 9th grader. Most families that have a young person murdered are not necessarily prepared for funerals, other aspects of the recovery process or the grieving process, and to some extent, the funding isn't available. Or isn't accessible if it is available. I'm talking specifically about this one family, because several We Are Us and others have been working with them and trying to help them get some resources. So I think we also need to think about some of the structural supports that may be needed for these young people. And in addition, in the schools, we had a number of teachers who were totally devastated because they knew the young man very well and weren't set to teach the next day. We had a lot of students also who were really affected, particularly the young people in the 9th grade who had been, known him in some cases for 8 or 10 years, even though they knew him as a young person because they were living in the same neighborhoods, and they were very much devastated. And then the families, the parents also. So I think that we need to be, thinking about what some of the structural responses and supports we need in a Baltimore. I mean, it'd be great not to have any of these things, but they do exist. And one of the things that's happened now is we had at least 3 teenagers murdered in the first 5 weeks of the year. So the young people now, I think, kind of rephrasing what Zeke said a little bit earlier, it's not like, oh, here's an incident and it occurred and 5 years later there'll be another incident. This is like 3 incidents of same age people getting murdered. That's really having an enormous impact, not on our young people, but also the teachers. Again, it's not just in that school, because the young people are saying, well, wait a second, this is now 3 different schools. Next week it could be my school. Next week it could be me. I mean, there's a lot of these things that are going on. And I think when we're thinking about the responses, it's going to be more than the short-term responses that we're sometimes either funded to do or talking about doing, and how to have, again, I don't necessarily have a solution, but I do think this is something the task force needs to be, or certainly our work group, the youth work group, but I think it also relates to some of the policy committees and some of the other things that we really need to be thinking about how to get those resources in. Because some of these are, families just don't have money to bury 14, 15-year-olds, particularly, some families do, but many families don't. And also don't even have, another thing, and I don't know whether Bishop Daniel wants to talk about this, but some of the young people, the families haven't been conducted to faith groups, so even who's going to do the services in an appropriate way without blaming the kid for getting, I've been unfortunately at some of these funerals where the kid gets blamed for getting themselves killed. And hurting their mother or making their mother feel sad because they got killed. It's not the thing you do in a funeral. So I think there's a lot of needs that we have. That we also have the assets. We have people that are doing it, but networking them in is more than just thinking we need sort of a person trauma response. I think we need some more of these, structural and other capacities. And again, we have the pieces, but it's hard to connect them together. The health department has some of these things. The state's attorney has some fun. Again, but there, again, for families of young people, I don't think we as a city have a good response yet. Not that we don't have good positive people and things, but it's also exceeding the capacity. I mean, just the numbers are exceeding the capacity.
That's a great point, Dr. Phil. Dr. Bishop Daniels, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think that what we can do is to Dr. Phil's point. I think what we can do is, Jonathan, I know we've been trying to get together for, just to work up at Morgan as well. But what we probably can do is if you could possibly come by the ministers' conference and just share some of these thoughts that Dr. Phil, I think that's critical. I know we've had mental health, the toolkit. We've had, a lot of us have had that training, but it may be worth you, BCRI, coming through to the conference, and I'll let them know when that you can be available to do that, and just really talking to all of the ministers. We're at Shiloh, New Shiloh Baptist Church, and others. I'm a part of BUILD as well, so I think that leads to an opportunity, a very ecumenical group where we can have that discussion as well to make sure that people are prepared for what is happening.
Yeah, great. Idea, Kevin. Just let me know when to be there. I am there.
Okay, well, we'll talk offline.
Perfect.
I would love that.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Thank you, Dr. Phil, for extending some services.
I'd love to see that relationship built. Dr. Daniels with Dr. Phil and some folks from BHSB and others have been doing some really interesting work with faith communities around mental health. And it's been, I think, really powerful to see in our city how those conversations have taken off. And so the more we can do to connect the different efforts around BCRI, mental health first aid, and the good work that's happening within the ministers' conference, I think the better off we'll all be for it. Briefly to speak to Phil's point, I think you're right that there's really kind of a gap and just some like discombobulated systems as it relates to victim services. This is not necessarily relevant to BCRI, but just generally, I think what we're finding is that like there's some funding in the health department for victim services. There's some funding at MONSE for victim services. There's some funding in the state's attorney's office for victim services. There's some funding in the police department for victim services. But what I've heard pretty consistently from victims and their families is it's totally confusing and difficult to access. I know that MONSE is making some efforts on streamlining and trying to bring those together. I'll also say we've had some conversations with folks like Lisa Moloch and Heather Workin and others about more of a connected process, because I do think that making sure folks get access to what they need as it relates to funeral costs, as it relates to mental health, just the immediate needs that families who lose someone to violence have is extremely important as we think about not, once again, re-traumatizing people who are already deeply traumatized. Anything else anyone wants to ask or push to our friend Jonathan over here?
Hey, lastly, Jonathan, this is Corey again. Also want to talk about training, especially for your peer support team. I know your clinicians probably already have it, but prevention is called PMAB. It's prevention and management of aggressive behaviors. Probably want to go ahead and make sure that our citizens that's going out to go ahead and help probably train in that as well. besides mental health first aid. But when we talking about, on scene with the aggressive behaviors that we have in Baltimore, that'd be another thing to help them see them through.
Good, Corey. I see Dina taking notes, so she has that down. And since you're talking about training, if there's individuals on the task force, if you would like to host a training for BCRI to facilitate, or if you know of any training and or existing meetings, activities, community events that we could join in on, please let us know, and we'll try to be there.
Hey, Zeke, I just wanted to offer some of the funding we have could sponsor, like whether you wanted to have a day or so, but it would have to be targeted to really address what Phil's issues is, which we all believe that there's a lot out there, but it's not coordinated. If we wanted to come up and spend a day to actually come with a model with what's already exists, to say, how do we get that information out there? It's not always a matter of what's available, what's accessible. What do we know about, right? If something could be across the street, but because of culture, because of cost, it might as well be across the ocean. But if we, we can help fund a day where we say, all right, let's get people in 2118, or, I'm doing some work with Morgan as well. They're creating a parallel effort. Let's do this, find around one school or one entity, the Inland Road Association, and say, let's do all the training, but also make sure that we know what's available. But how do we make sure that people know it's available, not that we hold the keys to the kingdom? We'd be willing to help support like a one-day conference to make that happen, not just talk about it, but do it. And then the other thing is with the police, what we also know about the police, in order for them to be better policemen, they need to be better people, which is to understand that more police die of suicide than they do in the line of duty. So you can't have one-off trainings. You have to continue to allow them to debrief, decompress, because they also have high rates of suicide, spousal abuse, all these negative outcomes. And then how do we send them out into the community when they aren't a part of the community, they serve the community? I think that has to be an ongoing narrative for the police, but also for everyone. These one-off trainings don't do anything unless you're building community that supports ongoing mental health and wellness. And that can't be the same thing with therapists. It has to be we support each other, but in ways that are informed by what we know, not what we think,
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Dave. I'll say two things. One, absolutely, in terms of, actually, I'll say three things. In terms of resource sharing and like, how do we get it out to the community? I do think, to your point and to others, like there is still a gap on how to access BCRI, like whether it's 988, whether it's, well, I don't even remember, but whatever the 410 number is. Like, I still think there's a lot of communities that don't know the service exists. And I think there's work to be done to disseminate it and just to make sure that folks know. I would also encourage, Dave, you to connect as Kevin Daniels and Jonathan get up on connecting around Morgan State, because I know you're involved over there as well. And I think the BCRI mixed with the stuff that Dr. Kevin is doing, mixed with the mental health first aid, all being in the same conversation could be really powerful. So I'd say, for you all to connect separately. And the last thing I want to plug, to your point, we do have our Healing City Summit coming up, which is a really good opportunity. We've done it every year, but it's a really good opportunity for all the groups to come together. We do it at Coppin State, and for us to push to community and community to push to us what the needs are and what's going on. And so, Franny, what's the date and time on that?
It is March 18th. I can get back to you on the time. I think it's like 11 to 2 or 10 to 2 or something like that.
Gotcha. So yeah, folks should put in your calendar, March 18th, our next Healing City Summit is coming up. Definitely space for everybody on the task force to show up and show off whatever it is that you're working on. So people should come out. Jonathan, last question. And then I don't know if you have any more time to connect with the youth group. I really appreciate it. And I know we moved the timing on this around and you've been super flexible. So I thank you for that. If you have an extra couple of minutes, I know the youth group in particular would love to chat with you. Is that possible?
Yeah, I can give a few more minutes.
All right, great.
Yeah.
So then I will save my question. But I do want to say thanks again for the good work that you're doing. Even though you're not on our task force, we consider you an honorary member because you spent a lot of time with us and because we've been in really good collaboration. And so again, I thank you for what you're doing, and please come back soon. Let us know once you got the money in pocket, how it's going and anything else we can do to help.
Great. Thanks as always.
Appreciate you. All right. So with that, we are going to jump into subcommittees. I do want to say really quickly before we do that, though, I want to shout out the training committee, who we know a while back had organized an RFP or RFA, I think, request for applications for the community-based training for trauma-informed care, that the funds that Monty had secured. That grant did get selected. It was the Pride Center of Maryland that won it, and they're going to be doing community-based trainings. I'm going to ask them to come before the task force and share with us what they're doing, and even potentially pull the training committee back in to think about supporting around evaluation and making sure that those trainings are robust and that they're getting out there. But again, want to just thank folks from the training subcommittee for making that happen, and for folks to know that that is moving forward, and it is of course needed now more than ever, particularly as we think about our LGBTQ communities, critically important need. So thank you for that. With that, we are going to jump into our subcommittees. And I will see you all again. Last time I'm going to plug it, but you got to show up. We're going to be at the library. It's going to be fun. We will have food. It'll be good food. And so show up in 2 weeks at Enoch Pratt.
The Penn North branch, but that'll be in the invitation. So I opened all the rooms. If your youth committee, stay here, just to make it a little simpler. So if you're on the youth committee, stay right here. If you haven't seen the option at the bottom of your screen, let me know and I will put you wherever you want to go. So apologies to the youth committee for taking a second on this. Is anyone having an issue getting where they need to go? I think we might be good. So I'm gonna hang out here just in case we're not good for like 30 more seconds, but you guys go ahead.
Okay. Well, I know Jonathan doesn't have time because we talked. So I think one thing is the listening sessions and stuff, because again, if any of the group on here, just let us know. But the other part was, a lot of groups are meeting already that are going on, and instead of convening a group, I think, and I don't want to speak for Jonathan, but he was interested in potentially going, particularly if there's youth already meeting and they know each other, and they're going to feel much more comfortable talking about this stuff than getting people where they don't even know each other. So if any of you have auspices where bringing up the trauma response would be appropriate, not every group is going to want to talk about that, but if it would be, I think that's another opportunity for for BCRI to hear about these things and get inputs. And I know City Schools is also putting together a series of discussions with youth to do that. But I just wanted to, if you had any other questions, because I know, Jonathan, you had to go to a meeting after this one that you want to raise to the youth committee, and then we could, I'm going to actually be at a meeting with a whole bunch of federal agencies and stuff in 2 weeks. So I won't be at our in-person meeting. But there may be some follow-up stuff we can be doing, or again, however we could facilitate, be helpful to you as you're moving forward.
Phil, I think you hit the nail on the head. If there are ways you could, connect me to folks that are within your network, so we could talk and listen to see what's happening in this space. I particularly have, real hard conversations about what are the gaps. That'd be great. And I know one of the interests Dr. Phil and I share is how do we, strand all of these services, together. And so there's a lot of great things happening, but they're scattered about and people don't know that they exist. And, there's definitely a way for us to be better integrated. And my hope is that as we roll out this mobile response for youth that is deeply integrated to what's happening in the space, but is also a catalyst to integrate other activities as well. So.
And Aisha, I don't know whether you have any suggestions. Because you're involved with a lot of this also, how we could be both networking with the youth stuff in particular, because this is the youth committee, but more generally, because again, as I pointed out, often, even though we're talking about youth, the parents also, it's not just youth we're responding to. If youth's the victim, then it's really a family or parent response. There's often siblings. There may be, again, as I mentioned with the schools, teachers and other staff who know the young person who are very much devastated, that need to be part of our trauma response. And again, some of these youth weren't necessarily killed in the school or on school grounds, but it still was devastating to the school staff who'd been working with them. So I think it's something that comes across both adult and youth supports. Trying to do this.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's interesting is that I think Jonathan spoke about the listening sessions with youth to really be able to assess where there are gaps in services, like sort of a program or environmental scan. And I think we are doing something similar to that in partnership with University of Maryland, School of Social Work and the Healing Youth Alliance through some funding that's coming through NACCHO. So I think this is really timely that we are really engaging youth as partners in this process, because these services that we're trying to design and implement for them really rarely has youth voice. And this is a prime opportunity for them to not only identify those gaps, but looking at those existing services that are available, really being able to give us some feedback on the effectiveness. So they are vetting some of these programs because that might very well explain the access or the utilization, the low utilization rate, because they have some concerns about the quality of services that some of the programs might be delivering. So I think this is really, really timely. And I know that there's a couple of meetings coming up with city schools. Next week, I believe there's a retreat that we're going to be having with city schools and the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success and MONSE around this very same issue. We're going to be rolling out our findings and recommendations from Child Fatality Review. So these conversations, again, they're happening. I'm just concerned that we're having these meetings and they're separated. And in some of these meetings, we're having some of the same conversations, and there's people like, I don't know if MONSE is here on the task force, but I think MONSE is really taking a real active role in leading a lot of these efforts to make sure that there's alignment with the Comprehensive Violence Prevention Plan and the CVI ecosystem. But what's a little bit concerning for me is that we're in these different spaces and we're having these different conversations. And it's not, I think we're getting there, but it's just difficult, getting all of the players in the same space so we can develop a comprehensive plan that is inclusive of everyone and all of these separate groups that are having these same conversations around the same issues. How do we get there is the question. I just don't know. I think Monzi is trying to get us there because they're going to be streamlining a lot of these efforts. But you know, I think that's my only concern, and I don't know how to bring it all together.
Yep. So I think one of the things is that, I mean, part of the problem, both the mayor's office and certainly city schools are very big organizations, and it probably requires more than one office because there's a whole bunch of other things, and that both the mayor's office, like the mayor's office of African American male engagement, because a lot of these victims are African American male youth. And that's not under Monsi, that's under a different, deputy mayor.
Right.
And the same thing with the schools. They often don't, they'll have some discussion there, but the people who oversee the schools aren't in the discussion, so that the dissemination within the schools, the clinicians want to do something, but the principals don't even know about it. So maybe I can follow up, because I actually had both discussions with the mayor and Dr. Santeliza, and they agree that they need to, again, we need to pull the different parts together to have a discussion, and not that they want to leave the meeting, but they want to be at the meeting so they can shake their heads up and down and have sometimes 2 or 3 different groups in their own organization have to work to, they need to meet together before the next meeting to figure out how do you do the administrative oversight versus the mental health services in the school versus the student supports, or the connection with the community, the people that are connecting with the community programs, the community schools, other kind of things that often have some good asset resources there because they're tied into the community, aren't in the discussion, even though they're very valuable if that happens in that school. They know the neighborhood association. They can bring on some of these additional support. So I think you're absolutely right.
And I can share with you that the mayor and Dr. Santeliza will be a part of this retreat next Friday. So they will be in the room, which is a very good thing.
Well, you all, it has been great. I do have to jump off. Dr. Phil and I are circling back sometimes next week to chat. And so if there's anything that comes out of this meeting here, he can definitely bring me to speak. But we are super happy to be in the youth space now, and we're really looking forward to leaning into this partnership to make sure we show up well.
Maybe Aisha, Jonathan, since they have funds to do that meeting next Friday, I mean, again, just maybe some other people you could network into the meeting so that we just don't have all these different meetings, but as you said, they're all sort of showing up at the same place, particularly when they have funds to try to do this. And again, some of the funding actually hasn't even started. I mean, as you mentioned, it's going to be starting in a month or two. Although you've been awarded it, the money hasn't actually started. So again, it's other than you or Dina or some of this, or Nicholas, or some of the people who the right person would be to do there to do this. And again, also if can have a couple of young people also there to be listening in or talking about this stuff, because I know that both at Forest Park, where we just had an incident, they were very concerned about that nobody was really listening to. There wasn't an opportunity for them to both talk about things that had worked for them, and maybe we need more of it as well. You don't realize that this is something that nobody's capturing. All right,
well, sounds good. Well, you all enjoy your evening, okay?
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for hosting us.
Okay, thank you.
Anytime. Welcome back anytime.
Bye.
Thank you all.
All right. So, hey guys, I know we're a smaller group tonight, but a great group. So I only had a couple things that I wanted to potentially ask to add to our agenda. First, I just wanted to provide a brief update on Parks and Rec stuff, which I don't have a ton. And then I wanted to see if we could move forward with hiring on the subject of youth voice and leadership, hiring our 2 youth leaders to help lead this work group specifically and start getting the word out about that. I made an application and a flyer, and I want to get your feedback. So that's the only other thing I wanted to make sure if we had time to talk about tonight. Does that work for everybody else? Anybody have anything else that they want to make sure is on tonight's agenda?
I think just a little bit more about what the schools are doing and, just sort of updates. Because I think there's, again, it's really a big organization and there's different pieces of it, and just as an information might be helpful. And then there's a couple other pieces on the rec follow-up that I can add in that.
Perfect.
Not very positive pieces, but they're at least pieces. So why don't you start off with whatever you think would be most helpful?
Sounds great. And I'm just making sure so I don't forget, I'm adding school information to the phone. All right, cool.
Do we have a representative on the task force from city schools?
No, and that's a great clarifying question. Dr. Leaf, you were just talking about updating this group about
there is no
upcoming
task
meetings.
force member, although Sabrina has been coming to a bunch of the meetings. I don't know whether she's actually on the task force or just been attending.
So I am the teacher representative.
And we actually have some employees.
But I am not in the district office capacity. I'm just a school teacher.
Okay.
Nothing just about that though.
Well, I can just say that I had a meeting with some city school leaders last week from student wholeness, home and hospital related services, school counseling. And I uplifted the fact that we were looking for representation from the district to be a part of these conversations. I know this is probably only my second meeting maybe, but I think I have received some feedback that city schools were supposed to be and were invited to be a part of these discussions, but haven't been consistently participating. And I know that that's something that I'm going to uplift again next week in our meeting, that we really need schools to be a part of these conversations.
And the other things that you brought up the schools, because when Louise Fink was chairing the city the health meetings and stuff, the trauma response, the mental health responses was often covered in that. And then with with her replacement, doesn't seem to have been in as much. And so I try to get, again, for that agenda, because that was again, I think a very positive place within each of the schools of different people coming to the meetings. And I know, Behavioral Health System Baltimore was also, participating in those. So it just seemed to be, if they weren't going to have it in another place, at least a place where it'd be some regular discussions at the structural for doing that. And it also was very helpful in the past to facilitate some of the trainings, because sometimes different training, sometimes the community groups got money for the training, and then they were able to also train the school psychologists to the social workers, because we don't want the social workers and school psychologists getting one set of trauma training, and then the community people getting a different set, and then they're all working with the same young people, and it gets very confusing. So you think, where the right interface for that would be, where it's, or again, building in one of their series, that group met every other month, or every, one group met every, that met every month, and now they're moving to every other month, but they may need to go back again.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so I added that, captured that into the agenda, BCPSS representation from North Ave, or someone who works in student wholeness office or something like that. And that we're working on that. So as far as Parks and Rec, I know actually Kieran might have a couple of things to add to this. We did have the site visits of the teen spaces, and are still working with Jasia and the other folks at BCRP to their training is, they're gonna soon be trained in trauma-informed practices. That'll be rolling out in the next month or so. So that is starting to move along. We've really, I got the sense from the work of the work group and the folks that were there that day that another tenable option that maybe we can support them in is really reaching out directly to the rec center leaders. And so a few of you may have been on the email I sent last week trying to follow up and see if maybe we could just have a one-on-one or a Zoom call with the rec center leaders of the 5 spaces that are going to get the teen special teen funding and teen spaces. That way we could say, what are you doing that your current students are really responding well to? How can we uplift or support you with, our different networks? And And if there's more, immediate ways that we can be assisting with trauma-informed care practices in those recs while we're waiting for the bigger system stuff to continue to move forward.
Mario, did you say that the recreation and parks are being trained on trauma-informed care?
Yes.
Through?
That is a great question. I would have to.
I mean, I thought you were saying this was University of Maryland that was doing.
Oh, no, it's not University of Maryland. It's going to be training them.
I know what you're talking about then. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't two organizations doing training with the same agency. Okay.
Oh, no. Do you know who's training them?
Yeah, so we contracted Sage Wellness
amazing
to do that training with Recs and Parks, and that's going to be starting in the next week or so. So yeah, and they're going to start with their frontline staff, tiers 3 and 4, so that they can get the training, at least 50% of the training series in before they break for summer programming.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So good things moving forward with that. Anyone have anything else? I'm gonna follow. I know they're busy right now but I'm gonna follow up on that email to see if maybe we can still have that meeting with those rec centers and see if there's anything we could do to potentially support over the summer.
Yeah, because I think one of the things was, although everybody said that they were doing great, they didn't have any problems, they didn't have any needs. And when you actually talked to them and said, they had particularly there were a couple of places that had really beautiful new places, and they don't have any staff. They had like 2 staff people, and so they had all kinds of equipment and other kind of things, and really nice scientific space for scientific training and stuff. And we know that there's community-based programs that are looking for place. I mean, again, they're not looking for money. They actually they want to do training, but they don't have a spot to do it. So it strikes me one of the things that we could do is facilitate where there's people that we know or that we can find out about who are competent to do some of the the youth training, and this isn't the trauma training, this is like the substantive training. There was some physical ed training that they were looking for and other stuff. And so I think we could potentially connect that, again, using our community connections with people who, are working in Cherry Hill or working over at the Oliver Center or something. So that was one thing. So that's positive. One of the less positive things was I've reached out to 3 different people at MICA, because one of the rec centers that we did a site visit with that was expanding resources for teenagers was the one that literally is 3 doors down from the MICA office. And I wasn't able to get a response from any of the 3 different groups, including the provost office, their community connections, or other folks. So I just, sorry, was not at all successful in being able to get that, because it seemed like that was going to be a win-win, that they were literally physically very close, and they were very interested, because I and several other people had worked with MICA students before who were wonderful and are looking for opportunities for training, because they're thinking about their careers. They're going to be teachers. They're going to be training using arts to understand stuff. So it seemed like something that was going to really work well. They weren't going to move very far because they're all living around there, because that's where the campus was. So we need to have a different way of trying to engage them, or if people do have some contacts. That was, I was optimistic because I'd worked with them in the past, but nobody got back to me.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that's why I'm really thinking this this individual meeting will be a better space to really grasp what would be supportive or what the needs are. I think anyone who's my school's folks will probably agree that when someone comes in for a tour, that's a different dynamic than like sitting down and having a conversation about needs and support. And so I feel like maybe that's why we got kind of everything's fine, everything's good initially on the surface. And that's why I really am excited to have a deeper conversation. And we could talk about potentially other partners. In that I was also thinking of Jubilee Arts, that's right down the street, that does amazing arts programming right on Penn Ave. And, no, they don't, have the glitz and glam of MICA and a university, but at the same time, like they would work all the time at Booker T and bring in awesome workshops directly to our students. And so maybe that's a cool connection we could make. Awesome. Anything else about Parks and Rec before I allow myself to potentially be roasted for the flyer that I threw together in Canva.
I'm sure it will be fine.
I just want to remind everyone that I'm a social worker and graphic designer. Okay, hold on. So just really quick, I actually need to double check that this QR code works, guys. But something that the vision is just something we can simply send out to the youth leadership organizations that we talked about before that work with a lot of youth leaders like YAR and Heart Smiles and different folks, and send this in an email along with the link directly to the application. And yeah, so this is my draft. This is what we had talked about potentially before as far as like age ranges, being from Baltimore, which we can change, sorry, with this little weird dots. I don't know why it's there. Okay. But yeah, this is the stipend amount. Obviously, when people are interested in, if we we'll have a meeting to like talk more with them, and we can give them a little bit more details on, you know, what we're working on, and pick their brain on what they think would be an important thing for this work group to dedicate time and energy to as well. But yeah, you know,
It looks awesome. You clearly could have had a second career as a graphic designer.
oh my gosh, Brendan, you're so sweet. It's truly Canva. It's not, not me at all.
So I guess one thing though, could we add in some place that if you have any, you know, because a lot of times people aren't going to apply, or you know, they have some questions, and so either would you be willing to take calls, or I'm willing to take calls. So that's somebody that if I have a question, they can, you know, we just need somebody who actually will respond to them. Because again, because I think a lot of times there's a lot, you know, one, we're talking about a bunch of hours, and people are going to want to know, well, what if I, you know, a little bit more before I actually apply, what is it going to be? So either, you know, on the, you know, either set up some times where we could have a Zoom meeting or something that people could go on as a group, or a phone number or an email address or something that they could call if they have some questions. Because I think even if there's no number or something, people sort of assume that, well, if I haven't heard about it, there must be you know, an inside track, and I'm not even going to apply because I don't know much about it, and then they're going to be paying people. So I think there's something that you know, sort of opens it up a little more for any questions or something. I think we'll get more responses than just sort of saying, here's how you can apply.
Okay, perfect. I can definitely do that. I'll just add, I'm fine to do my number at the bottom or something like that. And yeah, this goes directly to the application, which I'll share next, if that's all right.
Looks good, but it's great. It's fantastic. Thanks for
Right, and I want to make sure, because we talked about before, we want the application not super long, recognizing this is a few hours a month, but you know, also, let's see, we wanted it pretty easy.
Now, Mira, how long will they be employed?
So we're gonna do the contract by year, just because of, since it's based off of MONSE funds, we have enough to definitely cover 2 youth facilitators for this year. And likely for next year, we may have to cut back a little bit, like they may not be able to do fully 10 hours a month next year. But I know that when talking before, we're looking for other ways to fund this, because we want it to be permanent. But we're thinking like a year renewal, and yeah, obviously if someone comes in and they're really, really passionate and we work with them for a year and they want to keep going and everyone is in agreement, I think there's not going to be like a term limit or anything, but I think we're going to do like a yearly kind of contract with them. Yeah, so because the one thing we have to make sure is that they can make these meetings, pretty important. So put that up at the top, but name, email, making sure it's clear that that's where they're going to hear from us. Age, since that's something for us, for pronouns. And then this is kind of a referral situation if one of these and to capture because we're a youth that have had experiences with any of these organizations, since we partner with many of those, making sure that they are available for the meetings, and for extra time, because we also talked about if there is a meeting with Parks and Rec, wanting to make sure that our youth leadership would be able to go and make sure that their voice was at the table. So making sure they have that. This, I feel like we can be flexible if this is actually going to be something that would prevent us from hiring a youth leader if they don't have access to transportation around Baltimore or in Baltimore City. But I know it was lifted up as a potential concern for in-person events. So we can leave it on here, but I would totally leave it up to the group if.
Well, especially if we said they could be 14 or 15 years old, not
right.
14-year-olds are going to have their own transportation.
Right. I can totally take it off and we could just leave it a more informal question when we.
Why don't you say you need transportation or something? Because again, it seems silly to ask a 14-year-old whether they could provide transportation.
I think the concern was, and I'm not remembering, I don't remember it perfectly here, but I had it in the notes, was just that some of the events are going to be like in-person trainings and stuff like that, and wanting to highlight that, would you be able to align transportation to like an in-person meeting or event?
Right. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying it's disrespectful to ask a 14-year-old whether they can provide their own transportation.
Right. Okay.
They'll say they need it, but when you say, can you provide it? The 14-year-old's going to say, how am I supposed to provide, those adults who just ask these stupid questions.
I'm fully.
I was gonna say, like, maybe it's not can you provide your own transportation, but it is helpful to know if they can access.
Oh yeah, no. Do you need transportation? Do you need transportation?
Yeah.
Some people may say, I don't need it. I got buses, or I'm comfortable using buses, but so it's neat. We should ask it. We should ask whether they need it. Just they can't really. The young kids can't really provide it.
Agree. It's semantics, but I agree.
Yep.
And will that disqualify them if they do need it? Because if you're not going to provide it, if they express it as a need, are you going to be able to meet that need?
We have to provide it. We as a group need to provide anything that a young person would be an impediment that older people can do. We want to reduce any of the impediments and inequalities, and that's partially what we need to use funds for.
Yes, and that's something we agreed on and talked about.
Yeah, we did. I believe it is a budget item for us specifically. Awesome. So I agree. If I don't want it to give the impression that that's going to be something that would disqualify them from the opportunity, and so maybe we just leave it as make sure that in our informal meet and greets of the interested youth leaders, we ask about it and if it would be a need for them. Perfect. And then we get into more getting to know them and what they're passionate about. So the first thing, we're leaving it kind of general, and just finding out if they have already something that they're doing leadership and advocacy around, and then finding out if they've what their experience as a leader has been, and skills that they are proud and that they possess. Yeah. And then one that's kind of more about, trauma-informed care and healing-centered practices, and their availability. So those were the questions we talked about before, including anything we need to rethink or add or change.
I'm not sure young people know what trauma-informed healing centers means. I think we want to use some terminology that'll be more, they'll know, it sort of seems like, again, I don't think they necessarily know what that means, or will, we're going to be able to get, how do you think about how we, can more positively deal with trauma young people are experiencing or something?
I agree. The reframing of the question would be helpful. around like, what do you think like young people need who have had like bad experiences or negative experiences? And then a follow-up question of like, because it seems like you're trying to do like a two-part there. Like one, you're trying to tap into like, what do people need? Like, what do young people identify as needing? And then two, why do you think it's important for, agencies to do this? So you might want to do it as like two separate questions, because I'm gonna just be real. When you put a two-parter in the same thing, kids don't ever do the second one.
Yep,
Yep.
that is absolutely true.
No, I think those are good. I think those were nice wordings or something to try to figure out how to do that.
All right, Tracy, you said separate them into two questions and then have why you think
Because it's like, what do you think like young people who've had like bad experiences, and you even want to probably be more specific than just like bad experiences, right? Like bad or negative experiences in the city. Because I think it is, even though you can come from outside the city, there is more of a focus on this task force of improving city agencies. And then like, well, you can just leave it, bad experiences in their communities. So that way it's not restrictive. And then like, why do you think it's important for, I won't even say agencies, because right, like if I'm thinking of like a 15-year-old, you might not even know what that is. You may, but like, why do you think it's important for people or organizations that support young people to be aware of how to assist them, or something along those lines? Somebody jump in.
I love my educators. You did that so fast. Okay. Anybody? Let's see. So why do you think it's important for organizations who support young people to be aware of?
I even think to say just to take part in healing.
Yes, I like it.
That's great.
Great, yeah.
In healing, do you want to do healing or like healing practices, or you think just healing? Brendan is.
Because I'm not sure going to know what the practices are.
Yeah.
I mean, healing is something that I think
people
makes
know.
sense to them.
Yeah, I think it's okay to leave it kind of open-ended there. It kind of allows for differing responses, if that makes sense.
I like it.
Amazing.
Can I ask, sorry if you showed this, is there a specific question that says, I know you put it at the top in the blurb, just to go back to what Miss Bruce was saying, as an educator, my kids aren't probably going to read that blurb because it's really small when they're looking at it, especially on their phone. Is there a way to ask specifically, are you available Tuesday or Thursdays from 5:30 to 7 as one of the questions? If that's there, forgive me.
Oh, you're fine. I think I put, I could make it a little clearer because I put, will you be available Thursday evenings? And at least
you have it. I just missed it, so you're good.
Oh no, you're okay.
I would even push though for that question, right? Because it says like or at least 3 other hours. Most young people are not thinking about like, oh, I have 3 other hours on Thursday, right? Unless you explicitly point it out. And I know that Google Forms allows you to do a matrix. So you may literally just want to do like, Thursday, ask that question, and then for the rest of them a matrix, like Monday, are you available this time or this time, right? Like something like that allows you to capture. It puts it explicitly in their minds. They have to think like, on Monday, am I available between 4 and 7? And then it also allows you to aggregate data.
Do we have, okay, two things. One is our meeting time, which is starting at 5, it's 5:30. It's specifically 5:30 to 7. Are they available then? Because that's when the task force is meeting. I don't think between 9 and 5 is realistic to ask students with, I think that's again, putting them in a box that, we need to make sure we're meeting at times that young people can meet.
I agree.
Most days they can't meet from 9 to 2:30 because they're in school.
Yep, I agree.
We shouldn't even have those hours in there because they can't meet. And
Yeah, most kids aren't gonna be able to make it anywhere before 4:30. I just think like most of the high schools went to like a standardized bell schedule this year. And I think like some of them get out at like 3:35.
Yeah. So maybe just having available for the, again, the task force meetings
Yeah.
on, Thursdays, 5:30 to 7, that's an hour. And, when we do the interviewing and stuff, we can ask about other hours.
Yeah.
But they do, unless we're moving the task force, which again, we might, again, we don't get a chance, we may suggest it gets moved, but I think that's the hour that we, they got, right now, they have to be able to come to.
I think that's a great idea, leaving it kind of open, and then we can find like common times that both youth leaders are available, and then we know when we are scheduling those outside meetings, this is the times we got to work with. All right. Okay, guys. Other than that, does it look okay, or should we talk about it a little more next week, or should we start pushing it out? What are your thoughts?
I think it looks great. I mean, good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it looks great. I think it's a good idea to push it out. The more time we have to push it out, I think the better.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Well, I will send an email to the youth work group that has both the flyer, once I add my name and number to it, and the application link, and we can let it go live, and we'll do it. Maybe, what do you guys think about just using February entirely for recruitment, and see how many folks we get, and then start scheduling times probably outside of the meeting, since it's recorded and stuff, to meet the youth leaders that are interested. Your next steps. All right, guys. Well, thank you, guys. I hope everyone has a good night. Thanks for staying an extra minute.
Okay. And I won't be there. The next meeting, I'm going to be out of St. Louis with a bunch of
Me
folks.
too. You're going to be in St. Louis too, Dr. Leaf?
Yeah, with the Department of Justice meetings and stuff around trauma.
Yeah, DOJ stuff. Dr. Kyla has me going for CVIP to help with BMHA. So I also won't be here, unfortunately. All right. See you guys.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Aish, for coming.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Bye, Ryan.